Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Deku Was the Sun Hero. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Izuku and Toga walked from the train station to the UA campus hand in hand, smiles on both of their faces. Toga was happily snuggled into Izuku's side. Having his girlfriend by his side was doing wonders to keep Izuku's nerves from flaring up. Izuku and Toga were simply enjoying their closeness as they stopped to look up at the large building that was the best hero school in Japan. Out of my way Deku. Bakugo growled at the other teen as he made his way past Izuku and Toga, without so much as a glance back. He hadn't even acknowledged Toga being there at all. Bakugo is in his usual mood. Izuku shook his head at the ash blonde's attitude. Arrogant prick. Toga grumbled as her left hand drifted down to where she kept her butterfly knife hidden. That does seem appropriate. Izuku chuckled before kissing her cheek. Toga's hand left her knife and quickly went up to her cheek. She giggled happily as they both followed the signs to the written exam location. The written exam wasn't easy, as expected of UA, but both Toga and Izuku felt they did well enough on it to pass. When it came time to learn what the practical exam entailed, Izuku had a small fanboy moment at seeing the voice hero. Present Mick on stage going over the details. Toga giggled as she watched. But a growl to shut the hell up from Bakugo, who was sitting next to them, brought the moment to an abrupt end. Toga was seriously contemplating stabbing the explosive prick for ruining the moment. Getting called out by another examinee, a blue-haired teen with glasses and a very strict demeanor, had both Izuku and Toga quieting down. Though Toga muttered threats against the glasses-wearing teen until Izuku took her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. After the explanation was complete, the couple found out that they wouldn't be in the same exam site with each other. It's okay, Himiko-chan, you're going to ace this. Izuku reassured his girlfriend with a confident smile. I think I need a good luck kiss. Toga grinned with a look in her eyes while she licked her lips. Izuku met her lips with his in a brief kiss before they separated. Toga pouted about the kiss being too short. She even tried to hold Izuku to herself longer, but they had to get on their respective buses. Exam site B. Alright, here we are, let's begin. Izuku psyched himself up as he stood outside exam site B. The verdette began to bulk up and increase in size. A visible heat haze surrounded his body as he tapped into his hybrid quirk. Many of the other examinees looked on in shock. The verdette teen suddenly went from average height to standing well over 2 meters tall. He towered over everyone else in the exam easily. Start. Present Mick called out loudly from where he stood on a platform at the top of a tower, his voice reaching out across the large testing grounds, and to all the various groups of applicants. Everybody in Izuku's testing group froze up for a moment at the sudden start. Izuku being the exception as he used his massive strength to launch himself into the test site immediately. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real life. Run. Go, go, go. Mick yelled out to all of the stunned examinees. With no one in his way, Izuku was the first to find the mass of faux villain robots on the main street. Knowing he wouldn't have long until the other examinees caught up, Izuku began his attack. Target acquired, eliminate. Several of the robots intoned and Izuku couldn't help but smirk as he formed a large, compressed fireball in his right hand. I am not the target here, Izuku stated with utter certainty. You are. With that the teen threw the powerful fireball at the horde of machines. The first dozen or so were burned through without trouble, perfectly circular portions of their metal bodies missing. As the fireball traveled through one robot after another, it eventually destabilized and exploded. The blast rocked the street and made windows nearby shatter from the shockwave. Most of the examinees, who just arrived on the scene, stood with their mouths agape at the fact that a single guy had just taken out every robot on the main street. Within the first 30 seconds of the exam, in a single massive fireball, Izuku had already secured his place in UA High's hero course. Perhaps I should have held back. I don't know how many points I earned now. Izuku mused, realizing he didn't have any way of knowing what his current score was. Staff control room. Oh my, quite the powerful examinee we have this year. Nezu, the chimera-like principal of UA, commented after watching Izuku's attack. With the lack of collateral damage, beyond some broken windows, it's clear that the young man has worked very hard on his control. That much power and the road is only blackened a bit. That's rather impressive, to say the least. Cementus agreed with Nezu. Exam site C. 1 down. Toga smiled as she sliced the hydraulic line of the first one-pointer she came across. These robots all had rather obvious weak spots to exploit if you knew how. The machine, with the loss of pressure, couldn't lift its large arms and crashed into the ground before powering down. Toga grinned as she skipped off to find another target. The larger 2-pointers and 3-pointers might be a problem, but she'd still try and find a way to take them down too. She was getting into UA and staying with Izuku. No exam was going to stop her. As luck would have it, a 2-pointer spotted her just as she rounded the corner of a building. The large machine targeted her, but Toga was already moving. With focused eyes she leapt up onto the larger robot's back. Losing sight of its target sent the machine into a scanning mode. This was all the time Toga needed to notice the button at the base of the robot's neck. Is it a power button? The blonde girl questioned before pressing it. The robot immediately lost power and fell to the ground. Oh, that's useful. She grinned viciously. With this new knowledge Toga happily skipped through the mock cityscape. Every villain bot had a power button on it. If you could find out where the button was for each type, they could be disabled without having to destroy or damage them at all. Toga had already found out where the button was on the 2 pointers. Finding it on the 3 pointers was a little more difficult. I guess I can see why it's up here. Toga pouted as she pressed the button between the 2 missile launchers. She had to leap, flip, and basically parkour her way onto the 3 pointer. It was way harder than the 1 pointer or 2 pointer. But that makes 34 points for me. Toga wasn't the only examinee that had noticed the power buttons in her testing site. A girl, judging by her voice, was running around the site topless and turning off the robots too. This would have seen her disqualified if her quirk wasn't invisibility, which made it hard for the villain bots to target her in the chaos of the exam. Toga and the girl almost seemed to be in competition for who could turn off the most robots. I'm pretty sure I'm winning. Toga nodded to herself. But just in case. The blonde leaped off the disabled 3-pointer and rushed the 2-pointer before anyone else could target it. Exam Site B. In the last 2 minutes of the test the giant gimmick robot, the 0-pointer, was unleashed. Izuku had been going around the test site helping others that got cornered or overwhelmed, mostly by using his ridiculous strength to destroy the robots. The green-haired teen watched as the giant robot moved its way down the main street of the fake city towards him. Every examinee around him began to run from the colossal machine. The horde of teens quickly ran past the stationary Izuku. With a smirk, one bordering on arrogant, Izuku chuckled as he walked towards the behemoth. I see why it's just a gimmick. Not many quirks are compatible with an enemy of that size. Izuku mused as he continued to walk forward. The 0-pointer caused buildings to collapse as it passed them. Izuku briefly noticed a brunette girl turn and dash down a side street to get away from the falling rubble. A smart move, considering trying to run down the main street would have only placed her in the machine's path. Feeling the rays of the sun on his skin, Izuku set a firm look on his face. You'll go no further, he stated with finality. Izuku called forth his flames with a thought. The entire area surrounding him began to waver from the heat haze. The temperature spiked so much that warning messages appeared in the staff observation room. Izuku didn't know this, of course, but continued to channel his power. The street and buildings near him began to smoke from the rapidly increasing heat. Izuku raised his right hand into the air, palm up. The flames quickly began to swirl around this focal point. A fireball formed and rapidly grew in size. Be thankful that noon has already passed. My pyrokinetic abilities are at their strongest during the sun zenith. Izuku spoke to the 0-pointer as it continued to roll towards him. The massive ball of flames was at least 15 meters in diameter at this point. To everyone watching surprise, the teachers included, the massive ball began to shrink. The fireball was compressing into itself like a star about to go supernova. The center of the flames went from yellow to pale white. The center got brighter and brighter, until it was a dazzling white that was hard to look at. Eventually the center glowed with a bright blue color surrounded by a halo of intense white. Cruel sun. The much smaller ball of intense flames, now only about 3 meters in diameter, rocketed towards the advancing 0-pointer. The superheated ball burrowed into the titanic machine with ease. To the further shock and surprise of the onlookers, the massive 0-pointer was lifted off the ground and carried into the air. Superheated air was blasting out of the hole in the machine's chest, as it flew higher and higher into the air. 1 meter, 10 meters, 100 meters, 500 meters, a kilometer. The 0-pointer, a robot just over 60 meters tall, now looked like a small green dot in the sky. Pride flare. Izuku clenched his fist, and the green dot in the sky exploded in a massive fireball. The explosion was so large everyone in each of the test sites could see the blast. Even the people in town saw and heard the massive explosion in the sky. Exam Site C. That was awesome, Izuku. Toga cheered loudly, swinging her arms up and down like an excited child. The massive explosion could only be her Izuku. No one else in the exam could possibly have that much firepower. She laughed loudly in her excitement, and all the examinees stared at the sky in shock. 2 things were only noticed by the most observant of watchers. One was that despite the 0-pointer exploding, there was little to no debris or shrapnel falling to earth. Only tiny pieces of rapidly cooling metal would hit the ground around Exam Site B. The second thing was all of the villain bots shutting down automatically as the exam ended. Staff observation room. Ahahaha. Nizu laughed loudly at seeing what the green-haired examinee had done. My robot, Power Loader, muttered seeing his creation obliterated. What the hell is this kid? Vlad King questioned the room. He got only silence in response, beyond Nezu's laughter anyway. The rest of the staff could only stare wide-eyed at the power Izuku had just displayed. Even the thin blonde man in the back of the room couldn't help but gape in shock at the power wielded by the teenager. Exam Site B. Oh, right. Stop. President Mick's voice was heard throughout the testing grounds. the exam is over. Izuku exhaled as he let his quirk release and started to both cool off and shrink back down. He was fairly certain he'd gotten enough points to pass the practical, even if he hadn't actually been able to count them all. I can't wait to find out how many points Himiko-chan got. Izuku smiled as he walked back to the bus. He didn't pay any attention to the other examinees gaping at him or giving him a white bird. He was more focused on seeing his girlfriend again. Izuku climbed onto the bus and sat in the first seat. He'd be able to exit the bus faster when they got back to the main campus. UA main campus. Izuku. Toga cheered as she launched herself into her boyfriend's arms. Himiko-chan. Izuku laughed as he caught her flying glump. That was awesome. Every test site saw and heard your blast. Did you blow up the 0-pointer? That's gotta be it, right? Toga chattered excitedly with a grin. Izuku couldn't help but smile back at his excited girlfriend. Yeah, I got a little into the exam and saw the gimmick as a challenge. Izuku smiled sheepishly. Toga's eyes widened, along with her smile, as she looked at her boyfriend. Oh? Did my Izuku get all riled up? Toga teased as she pressed herself against him. Do you need me to help you calm down and relax? She whispered breathily into his ear. Himiko-chan. Izuku exhaled as he pulled her closer. Don't be naughty in public. Toga giggled as she took his hand and led him towards the gates. Then let's go somewhere private, Izuku-kun. Toga teased as she pulled out her phone. She typed out a message to her parents and then put it away. Alright, you're so eager, Himiko-chan. Izuku chuckled as he pulled out his own phone and sent a text to his parents. He simply told them that he and Toga were going to celebrate finishing the UA entrance exam. The two teens smiled as they left the campus and took a train to the closest entertainment district to the school. Halfway through the ride, Izuku received a reply from his parents. Both told him to have fun but to be back before dark. Come on, Izuku. Toga urged him as she pulled him along. Where are we going exactly, Himiko-chan? Izuku questioned with a laugh. Right here. Toga smiled as they entered a carry box. The guy behind the front desk smiled at the teens as they approached. What can I do for you? The man asked. We'd like to rent a box for an hour. Toga smiled back. Alright, that'll be 1,000 yen. The man informed them. Toga went for her wallet, but Izuku already had his out and handed the bill to the man. Izu. Toga pouted cutely. I want to. Izuku grinned at her. The man behind the desk chuckled at the cute couple. Box 9 is all yours, kids. Down the hall and take a right, it's the last door in the hall. The man informed as he handed them the room pass. Thank you, sir. Izuku smiled as he took the pass. The two made their way down the hall and into box 9. The room was spacious enough for upwards of 5 or 6 people. It had the standard karaoke equipment set up and ready. Toga closed the door to the box with a grin. All karaoke boxes are soundproof by design. They're made that way so that every box could have a group singing loudly in them and not bother each other. Now that they were alone in a soundproof room, well, singing was the last thing on Toga's mind. Izu. Toga breathed out as she wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her body against his back. Let's celebrate. She licked his ear and nibbled on it, making Izuku gasp. Himiko. Izuku turned to face her and captured her lips. His girlfriend was heavily into physical affection and intimacy. In the year that they'd been dating, she was the one that set the pace for advances in their relationship. Izuku would put his foot down if she tried to go faster than he wanted, but so far that hadn't been a problem yet. The two separated their lips to breathe for a moment. Toga gently pushed Izuku onto the padded bench and straddled his lap. Their lips quickly found each other again, and their kissing deepened. Tongues came into play and Toga moaned into their kiss. Izuku. Toga hummed when his hands cupped her bottom and began to massage and squeeze her cheeks. More? She questioned with a pant. Izuku, knowing and dating Toga for so long, knew what she was asking and nodded to her with a fond smile. With a happy giggle, Toga opened his uniform jacket and helped him shrug it off. His shirt came next, leaving his torso bare. She moaned approvingly as she ran her hands up and down his muscled chest. Cooing softly, she kissed his shoulder, and then his neck. She licked the juncture between them before gently sinking her pronounced canines into his skin. Izuku let out a sound between a groan and a hiss, as he always did when he let Toga taste his blood. Toga was moaning softly into the bite as her tongue gently licked up the blood that flowed. Her fits had never gone away, but they were easily kept from being a factor in her life by Izuku's blood. A few drops and Toga didn't have to worry about anything for a few days. When they were intimate like this, Toga usually got enough to last for weeks on end. While she enjoyed his blood, Izuku would enjoy her amazing body. Removed R18 part cause of YouTube. Toga was in a daze as she and Izuku got dressed again. She almost put her shirt on backwards. She couldn't seem to figure out how to get her shoes back on after she kicked them off, and she was having a hell of a time getting her hair buns back up. She wouldn't trade this feeling for anything though. She loved it when Izuku doted on her in the bedroom, and she'd eventually figure out all the complicated parts of getting dressed again. Let me help, Himi-chan. Izuku chuckled softly as he quickly gathered up her long blonde hair and helped her make the right side bun. The left followed, and by then she was clear-headed enough to put her shoes back on. The two left the karaoke box with no one any the wiser about what had occurred. Toga happily clung to Izuku's arm the whole way back to her house. The two shared a loving kiss before Izuku left to catch the train to his home. Midoriya apartment. Did you have fun, Izuku? Inko asked her son when he got home. Yeah, Himiko-chan and I went to karaoke box. Izuku told the truth to his mother. That's nice, sweetie. Inko smiled warmly at him. Dinner will be ready in a while. I'm making your favorite. Thanks, Mom. Izuku smiled brightly at his mother. Inko beamed back at him and set about preparing the ingredients. Izuku smiled at his dad as he was about to head to his room. He stopped when his dad spoke up though. Izuku, did you get hurt at the exams? Hisashi questioned his son. No, I don't think I did. Izuku blinked. He hadn't been struck once by a single robot the whole time. You've got a bruise. Hisashi tapped at the left side of his own neck. Izuku's hand went up to the area. He knew what his father was talking about now. Himiko's bite had healed up by now. But he'd still have the bruise for another 30 minutes or so. He also knew exactly what it looked like. Well then, I'm glad to see you and Himiko had fun at karaoke. Hisashi smirked at his teen son. A knowing look was in his green eyes. Izuku felt his face heat up and looked down at the floor. His dad had seen the equivalent of a hickey on his neck from his girlfriend. This was super embarrassing. When his dad went so far as to give him a thumbs up, Izuku quickly retreated to his room. Hisashi chuckled as he turned towards the TV. His son was becoming a man. He and Toga-chan seemed to have progressed to second base. Maybe he'd run over to the Anmitsu place down the block and pick up a nice dessert for after dinner. It would be a subtle celebration for his son's relationship progress. Hisashi didn't know that he was a base short. If Izuku had his way, his father would never know that either. 1 week later, Midoriya home. Izuku, it's your son. Hisashi exclaimed as he walked down the hall towards his son's room with the letter addressed to the teen. It was from Yue, and Hisashi had already decided it contained his son's acceptance letter. Thanks, Dad. Izuku thanked his father before taking the letter and heading for the living room. Let's open it together in the living room. The duo quickly entered the living room and sat down. Inko was quick to join them. Here it goes, he said as he opened the letter, and out came a metallic disc. A hologram projector. Hisashi questioned before the disc lit up and a hologram appeared in their living room. Greetings, Midoriya Izuku. That's right. It's me, Nezu. Am I a dog, a mouse, or a bear? More importantly, I'm the principal. Nezu introduced himself cheerily, getting Izuku to grin. I'm happy to inform you that you passed the written exam with a very respectable 92%. Not the highest in the exam, but a very respectable score nonetheless. As for your practical exam score, please look behind me. The camera pointed to an electronic board that turned on, showing Izuku's picture and score. Practical exam score. Izuku Midoriya. Billing points. 117. Rescue points. 55. Total. 172 points. As you can see, you performed very well. The new record holder for highest score, in fact. Nezu congratulated with a smile on his face. I'm pleased to welcome you to UA High School, Midoriya-san. This will be your hero academia. That's my boy. Hisashi cheered as he playfully ruffled his son's hair. Oh, my baby boy. Inko happy cried as she hugged her son for all she was worth. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. I was certain I passed, but it feels great to hear it. Izuku smiled. Even though he'd reasoned that he passed, it was a completely different thing to get the confirmation. Also, record holder for highest score, only to be expected for the future greatest hero. Izuku hugged his mother tightly while his father picked up his cell phone and declared that he was going to get them a reservation at a nice restaurant to celebrate tonight. Izuku was eventually able to get a moment to call Toga and hear her results. Hello, Izuku, you got your results too? Toga asked, and Izuku confirmed it for her quickly. Yeah, Himi-chan, I took first place in the exam. The message also said I was the new record holder for highest score ever. Izuku grinned. He was proud of his accomplishment. That's really hot, Izuku, and maybe we should get together when your parents aren't home and celebrate properly. Toga tempted him with a throaty purr. Izuku felt himself shiver pleasantly from the tone. You're minx, you know that. Izuku questioned his girlfriend. I try. Toga teased. Maybe we could make it work. Do you want to try this weekend? Izuku questioned with a grin. He knew to respond to Toga's teasing with his own. Otherwise his girlfriend would wield all the power in their relationship, and wouldn't that be boring? I will come over there and make you keep that promise, mister. Just keep going until one of us passes out. Toga moaned into the phone. Don't threaten me with a good time. Izuku retorted even as he felt a phantom bolt of pleasure run up his spine. Do your best, son. Hisashi smiled proudly at Izuku. Beside him, Himiko was holding back tears at watching their son head off for his first day at UA High School. Sure thing, Dad. Izuku smiled brightly at his parents as he headed out the door. Izuku hummed as he enjoyed the morning sunshine. He walked to the train station and boarded the correct line. After 2 stops, Toga joined him in her own UA uniform. Izuku smiled warmly at seeing Toga in the gray jacket and dark green skirt. Good morning, Izuku. Toga beamed at her boyfriend. The blonde's eyes roamed up and down her boyfriend, taking in how he looked in his uniform. She barely restrained from licking her lips at the sight. Izuku looked good in a uniform. Good morning, Himiko-chan. Izuku smiled warmly in return. Toga quickly sat beside him and leaned into her boyfriend. They entwined their fingers and enjoyed each other's closeness on the ride to their first day of high school. Both had been ecstatic to find out they'd be in the same class. If they hadn't, Toga would have raised hell. She'd have threatened one of the other students to switch with her at knife point if she had to. Hearing the automatic voice informing the passengers of the next stop, both Izuku and Toga stood up. They needed to get off here and then walk the remainder of the way to school. Honestly, in Toga's opinion, any extra time to walk hand in hand with Izuku was time well spent. Disembarking from the train and making their way out of the station, the couple took in the spring views and the pleasant morning. They both smiled reflexively as they walked through the large gates of the school. Both of them were proud of their accomplishment of being accepted by the #1 hero school in Japan. Toga felt an added sense of accomplishment on top of that. After all, her quirk had been called villainous or creepy more times than she could count. But now she was here, at UA High of all places. She was going to prove all of those people wrong. She'd be a hero, just like Izuku, and save people with her quirk. Ready, Himiko-chan? Izuku asked with a grin as they stood in front of the door to Class 1A. Always, Izuku. Toga chirped back as she stood on her toes to peck his cheek. Izuku placed a gentle kiss on her forehead in response, and Toga's smile could have lit up the hallway all by itself. Izuku opened the large door and both of their faces dropped. Izuku looked exasperated, while Toga looked like she wanted to slap somebody. Take your feet off that desk, immediately. The blue-haired teen from the entrance exam demanded as he chopped the air. It's an insult not only to the people that made it, but also to our seniors who studied here before us. You're kidding me, right? Bakugo sneered back at the other teen. Did your old school put a stick up your ass, or were you born with it? Should have known. Izuku sighed with a shake of his head. Why is he here? Toga grumbled, eyeing Bakugo like a pile of garbage. He shouldn't have even gotten in. Even if he did, they could have at least put him in a different class. It's him, the new record holder. The blue-haired teen blinked as he noticed Izuku and Toga standing in the doorway. TSK. Bakugo scowled at Izuku from across the classroom. All of the other students in the classroom, the majority apparently as only a few seats were empty, looked towards him at the same time. Good morning. Izuku greeted the class as a whole. He was more than used to being looked at by people that knew the power of his quirk. Morning everyone. Toga smiled, mostly at the other girls in class, with a wave. Good morning, my name is Iida Tenya, from Sumei Private Academy. Iida walked quickly towards the couple to introduce himself. I'm Midoriya Izuku, it's nice to meet you. Izuku returned the greeting. Toga Himiko, are you going to get on Izuku's case again? Toga questioned, and Iida, clearly remembering the incident in question, shook his head in the negative. He'd been in exam site B and seen what Izuku was capable of after all. I was very impressed by your record-breaking achievement at the entrance exams, Midoriya. Iida congratulated Izuku. Thank you. Izuku nodded to the glasses-wearing teen. It was a good exam, it's not often I get to really use my quirk like that. He heard some comments from his new classmates when they heard Iida's mentioning of his record-breaking. So that's the guy that scored even higher than All Might back in the day. A spiky red-haired boy said to a blonde guy with a black lightning bolt-like streak in his hair. No way, for real. The blonde questioned, looking between Izuku and the redhead. Wasn't the old record like 150 or something? A pink-haired girl questioned with a blink as she looked at Izuku. I saw the list for the entrance exam, he got 172 on it. A tall, brunette teen with a muscular frame spoke up. That's impressive. A boy with a bird-like hat remarked. Damn Deku. Bakugo growled from his seat, still glaring at Izuku. Everyone's talking about you, Izuku. Toga giggled at her boyfriend. The pink-haired girl sitting in the second seat perked up at the affectionate form of address. Did her new class already have a couple in it? She bounced a bit in her seat at the thought of getting to chat with the blonde girl. I'm used to it. Izuku smiled at her. If you're just here to chat, you can pack up your stuff and leave. A male voice came from behind the couple. Turning to look, the duo found a man in a yellow sleeping bag lying on the floor. Neither was quite sure what to make of this new occurrence though. Who is this guy? Izuku wondered as he looked at the scruffy face poking out of the sleeping bag. Welcome to UA's hero course. The man spoke as he stood up and unzipped the sleeping bag. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. That's too long, time is precious and rational students would understand that. Wait for me, please. A female voice called out and a brunette girl entered the class. Sorry, I almost got lost. You're technically not late yet. The scruffy man informed the girl with a sigh. Try to be more punctual from now on though. Yes sir. The brunette bowed slightly as she headed back to her seat. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Aizawa informed the class. All of the students stared in shock at the information. Right, let's get to it. Put these on and head outside. He pulled out a gym uniform from the sleeping bag and showed it to the class. Huh? Every student blinked at the sudden instructions. In only a few minutes the class of 20 found themselves on a practice field. Thankfully, UA had pretty good signage to lead students to locker rooms and practice fields. so it was easy to find their way to them from the classroom. The Quirk assessment test. All the students questioned when Aizawa informed them of what they'd be doing. But what about orientation? We're going to miss it. The brunette Chako spoke up. If you want to be a pro, you don't have time for pointless ceremonies. Aizawa replied. Here at UA we're not tethered to traditions. That means we get to run our classes however we see fit. With a quiet exhale, Aizawa held up a phone-like device. You've been taking standardized athletics tests your entire school lives, but you've never been allowed to use your quirks. The Ministry of Education is still trying to pretend we're all created equal and not letting those with the most power excel. It's not rational. One day they'll learn. With a shake of his head, Aizawa focused on Izuku. Midoriya, you broke the record on the entrance exam. What was your best throw on the softball pitch in junior high? 68 meters, sir. Izuku replied. Right, try doing it with your quirk. Aizawa instructed and pointed to a circle on the ground. Anything goes as long as you stay in the circle. Alright. Izuku looked at the ball in his hand. It was equal in both size and weight to a softball, but with a metallic black ring around the middle. With a thought, Izuku bulked up. Heat began to emanate from his body as he used his quirk. A rather easy test for me, honestly. The verdette teen thought with a small smirk. So he's got a strength-enhancing quirk, huh? The red-haired boy Kirishima grinned as the class watched on. That's pretty manly. Oh, that's not even all of it. Toga giggled as she grinned at Izuku's towering form. What do you mean? Kirishima blinked as he turned to face the blonde girl. Oh, you'll see in just a second. Toga smiled like a cat that snatched a canary. Izuku, now standing at 2 meters in height, cocked his right arm back and focused his pyrokinetic ability through his body. The synergy of his hybrid quirk empowered him further, and he focused on not destroying the ball. With a powerful throw, the ball rocketed off into the distance. The simple throw had kicked up an impressive gust of wind, and the students, barring Toga, all stared at the strength of their new classmate. A blast of fire went off in the distance, and the students were confused. That was part of my throw, no cause for alarm. Izuku waved to his classmates to assure them. The teen's attention was only diverted a few moments later when Aizawa spoke up. All of you need to know your maximum capabilities. Aizawa stated as he turned to face the class as a whole. It's the most rational way to figure out your potential as a pro hero. He held up the device in his hands so that the students could see it. On the screen was Izuku's result of 5,346.1 meters. Izuku grinned as he listened to his classmates gasp at the distance. Over 5 kilometers, are you kidding me? The lightning bolt teen Kaminari exclaimed in shock. What kind of quirk is that? A large boy with gray hair and a face mask questioned. That was awesome, Izuku. Toga cheered and all of the other girls in class looked at her. Some had blushes on their faces at the affectionate form of address. Others smiled at what was obviously a couple in their class. The pinkhead with the pink skin practically had sparkles in her eyes. Not a bad throw, considering I had to hold back to not destroy the ball. Izuku chuckled and several of his classmates' jaws dropped. That was holding back. I wanna go, this looks fun. The pink girl clapped her hands together. This is what I'm talking about. Getting to use our quirks as much as we want. A black-haired boy cheered. So, this looks fun, huh? Aizawa questioned, quickly silencing the students. You have 3 years at UA to become a hero. Do you all think it's going to be all games and playtime? Seeing none of the students replying, Aizawa continued. Fools, today you'll engage in 8 physical tests to gauge your potential. Whoever comes in last will be deemed to have none and will be expelled immediately. That got a round of gasps from all of the students. Immediate expulsion for coming in last on these 8 tests. Izuku raised an eyebrow at Aizawa's words. That seems rather harsh, even for UA, to simply expel students so arbitrarily. As I said, we get to decide how our classes are run. If that's going to be a problem, you can head home right now. Aizawa stated as he pushed his long hair up out of his eyes and stared at his students. Now let the games begin. First test, 50-meter dash. Izuku watched as Iida and the verdette girl with the frog-like features took their places at the starting line. He was interested in seeing how his classmates did and what all of their quirks were. He already had his notebook out, which made Toga giggle at a quirk nerd of a boyfriend. Just at a glance he could tell that both Iida and the girl had mutant-type quirks. Their times were impressive though. Iida clocked in at just over 3 seconds, and the girl at about 5.5 seconds. Watching his classmates run, and in some cases, use their quirks in interesting ways to complete the 50 meters, was letting Izuku fill his notebook pages quickly. Something the verdette teen was smiling about. Achako finished in just over 7 seconds and seemed pleased with her result. Toga and the pink girl Mina both finished at just over 5 seconds. Mina appeared to be skating on something coming from her feet. Wondering what it was and what exactly her quirk was made the quirk enthusiast smile. When it was Izuku's turn, he ended up being paired with Bakugo, much to his own resignation. You'll be eating my dust, Deku. Bakugo growled at him as they took starting position. Oh? Izuku arched an eyebrow at the ash blonde. If you want to be competitive, then I'm all for it. With his body swelling in size and the heat that was generated because of it, Izuku took his stance. The bang of the camera robot's gun went off. With a burst of insane strength, Izuku shattered the starting blocks. The now larger teen cleared the 50 meters in only 3 strides. An impression of his foot was left anywhere he'd taken a step. He clocked in at 3 seconds flat. Bakugo was practically snarling when he'd finished a full second and a half later. The Ash Blonde's use of his explosions as thrusters hadn't meant anything to Izuku's speed. Grip strength test. If not for Izuku, Shoji Meizo would have dominated this test with his 540 kg squeeze. But Izuku was nothing if not a powerhouse physically, and maxed out the dynamometer with an insane 999 kg reading. Yorozu Momo was the only one to match Izuku's feat when she made a miniature hydraulic clamp with her quirk and used it instead of her hands. Toga had come in with an impressive 45 kg. She was easily the strongest grip among the girls. Seated toe touch test. The seated toe touch test hadn't been challenging for Izuku. He was flexible and could get a good score on it easily. Mina was the overall winner on this test. The pink girl showed off some insane flexibility as she practically folded herself in half and was able to reach well past her feet with the tips of her fingers. Toga had placed second, almost able to match Mina in flexibility. The blonde and pinkette seemed to be hitting it off rather well as they chatted between tests. Standing long jump test. The standing long jump was cleared easily by Izuku. His great strength saw him even outdoing Tsuyu and her frog quirk. When he added his pyrokinesis to the mix to act as jets, he became the clear winner as he landed well over 100 meters away. The giggling Toga had landed at the very end of the box and returned to her place by the time Izuku got back. Repeated side steps test. The repeated side steps were easy enough. With his enhanced physicality, Izuku secured second place. He'd left impressions of his shoes in the dirt when he finished. He was only beaten out by the short boy Mineta with the ball-like hair. The boy bounced between 2 cushions of his quirk at such speed that no one could keep up. Toga had ended up in 5th place on this test, though the blonde girl didn't mind. She was very much looking forward to the next test though. Sit-ups test. The sit-ups test was also conquered by Izuku without 2nd place even being close. Toga had made sure she got to hold Izuku's feet. Once Izuku had finished the test, beating out the brunette boy Sato, Izuku became the immediate target of Mineta's envy. Toga had leaned forward on the last sit-up to pack Izuku's lips, which Izuku returned with a smile. The short teen had looked on with an incredibly desperate face, one that had gotten him some uneasy looks from those that saw it. Endurance running. Izuku and Iida eventually tied. Izuku had even struck up a conversation with Iida about the blue-haired teen's quirk as they ran around the track over and over again. Aizawa had eventually just told them to stop after they'd gone on for so long that they were cutting into the class's time to finish the last test. Softball pitch test. As Izuku had already done the softball pitch test, he didn't have to throw again. Instead, he was able to watch as his classmates came up with their own methods of getting farther throws, if their quirks were applicable to the test, of course. Bakugo raged when he'd gotten 705.4 meters and stood angrily away from the rest of the class. Izuku had blinked in surprise when Momo had created a fully functional cannon of all things and fired the ball out of it. The vedette had been writing so fast Toga thought the paper might catch fire. The Ravenet score of 3 kilometers and change was well earned in his opinion. Ichako left every student's jaw on the floor when she'd removed the effects of gravity from the ball and seemingly thrown it into orbit. Her reading came out as infinity, but Aizawa would only mark it as 1 meter further than Izuku's score. Needless to say, Izuku's notebook now had an entire page dedicated to both Ichako's and Momo's individual quirks. Toga had been giggling the whole way to the pitching circle. She narrowed her bright yellow eyes as she focused. With almost perfect form, she threw the ball as hard as she could. The ball went flying through the air and landed 60.2 meters away. That was great, Himiko-chan. Izuku pulled Toga into a warm hug. Toga happily snuggled into the embrace. They only separated at Aizawa's voice. I'm just going to bring up the whole list. It's not worth going over each individual score. Aizawa informed the class as he clicked the device in his hand. A hologram appeared and listed off their names from 1st to 20th place. Izuku chuckled as he saw his name sitting exactly where he expected it to be. Toga hugged his arm with muffled giggles of her own. Quirk assessment ranks. Midoriya Izuku. Yorozu Momo. Todoroki Shoto. Bakugo Katsuki. Iida Tenya. Tokoyami Fumikage. Shoji Meizo. Hiroshima Jiro. Toga Himiko. Ashido Mina. Uraka Chako. Kota Koji. Sato Aikido. Asu Tsuyu. Aoyama Yuga. Sero Hanto. Kaminari Denki. Jiro Kyuka. Kagakure Toru. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.